Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Greg Ramsey. From the world of professional wrestling comes one of the most iconic figures of all time, with a gimmick and work ethic that made him the face of WCW, culminating in a dark and shadowy character that continues to intrigue fans of all ages, making him a legend in the industry. We're talking about Sting. The man called Sting came into the business at a time when the territories were in their twilight and the national companies were dominating the pro wrestling scene. Born Steve Borden on March 20, 1959 in Omaha, Nebraska, Sting played high school sports and became an amateur bodybuilder before training to become a pro wrestler in 1985. Sting debuted as Flash in an All-California Championship Wrestling alongside Justice Jim Hellwig, who later became the Ultimate Warrior, as Power Team USA. The duo later moved to the Continental Wrestling Association and became the Freedom Fighters, but were unable to gain any real traction. The team joined Bill Watts' Universal Wrestling Federation in 1986, where they became the Blade Runners. Now known as Sting and Rock, Borden and Hellwig began wearing face paint and working like an unstoppable power unit, similar to the Road Warriors. Though the team seemed to make some forward progress, Hellwig soon left the company, forcing Sting into a singles career. That career began to take shape following the UWF sellout to Jim Crockett Promotions in 1987. NWA head booker Dusty Rhodes saw Sting's potential and began to spotlight him as a rising star in the promotion. Sting realized that potential when he faced Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship at the first Clash of the Champions on March 27, 1988. The match went 45 minutes, and though it ended in a draw, Sting emerged as a red-hot commodity in the industry. He would go on to become the face of the company in the years that followed. Though Sting continued to be one of the most popular stars in WCW throughout the 1990s, he found himself beginning to stale in an era when the anti-hero became the new trend. That, combined with the arrival of the NWO, led Sting to completely change his gimmick in 1996. Sting modeled his appearance after comic books' The Crow, a dark and mysterious figure bent on revenge. Sting's reinvention enhanced his character's popularity with the fans, and though he had opportunities to join Vince McMahon's WWE, he remained loyal to WCW. After the company closed its doors and sold to WWE in 2001, Sting eventually debuted in TNA Wrestling, where he continued his anti-hero character. Sting finally came to WWE in 2014 and faced Triple H at WrestleMania 31 the next year. Following a brief run later that year, Sting finally retired and was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2016. Sting's career remains the stuff of legend, as he is considered by many to be the best talent that WCW ever produced. He is an all-time fan favorite, a 14-time World Heavyweight Champion, and his influence is still being felt by a generation who followed his example. And that's the lowdown on Sting. We did the NWO episode, and I had a lot of fun with that. And the truth is, that episode ended up being the first one. I think you and I kind of decided very early on in this process, Greg, that we could do one of two things. We could number these shows and make them as analytical as possible and as episodic as possible. And, this is number 1, number 2, number 3. And honestly, that's what I've done with the main event since I started in 2014. That's how I've always done it. I just kind of thought that's how you're supposed to do it. But when thinking about what this show was going to be, I kind of just wanted to do something different. So although the NWO did not start out as our first episode, it became what we would call episode number 1. And during the recording of that, we, of course, talked about Sting. You can't talk about the NWO without talking about Sting. It's virtually impossible. It's like talking about the Four Horsemen and never mentioning Ric Flair. You can't do that. If you do, it's lame. What kind of review is that? So the minute that we started talking about the NWO and Sting's name came up and we started covering all aspects of how he was involved, what he meant to them, what they meant for him, what he meant to that company, I automatically started thinking, okay, the wheels are turning. We have to do an episode on Sting. So here we are. When it comes to icons, and that word's funny here, dude, because as you know, he used the word icon on himself. I think when he turned heel in WCW and then later in TNA. So, that part is what it is. But I think it's fitting of all the icons, of all the big names in the past 30, 40 years of this business, Sting's got to be in the top. I mean, he's definitely in the top 10. A lot of fans would probably put him in the top 5. He's got to be one of the biggest, maybe of all time, yes?
Absolutely, man. Sting really put himself out there, and he lit up the screen, right from day one in WCW, I thought. I mean, here's a guy, his face is painted, he's got a really good body, and you can really see the bodybuilding background there. Him and, his former partner, Jim Hellwig, who would end up being the Ultimate Warrior, their careers kind of mirrored each other. You go back and look. Both of them were face painters. They both had fantastic physiques, and they just took their rival promotions to new heights. And they didn't stop, man. They just they kept going. And I think Sting, of course, Sting was probably a little more technically sound than Hellwig, and he just really went out there and entertained the fans, and you could tell he was a really nice guy. He enjoyed entertaining the fans and really getting the crowd up on their feet.
And what's funny is you kind of tend to lose that nice guy side of him, at least I did, because at this point, the Sting that I think about is Sting version 2. Well, yeah, Sting version 2, which is the Crow. When I think about Sting, I no longer really think about the guy with the beach blonde spike haircut and the neon tights and the neon face paint who's howling at the camera. I don't really think maybe that's not fair because that's how we all were introduced to him. But looking back on him, I don't think of that Sting, man. So for me, it's easy to forget that smiling, nice guy. And dude, no one that I've ever heard of, read an interview with, heard an interview with, or ever talked to in this business has ever said anything negative about this guy. I mean, ever. So he's a nice guy in the pro wrestling business, which is it's like meeting an honest lawyer, which, newsflash kids, a great friend of mine is an honest lawyer, believe it or not. But, in the pro wrestling business, it's a hard thing to find a genuinely nice guy. So again, I don't know how often I would go back and think of that until he's doing an interview out of the paint. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's Steve Borden. That's the guy, right? But again, when I think of Sting, I think of that duster. I think of that paint. I think of those gloves and those black boots and that singlet, and dude, that to me is Sting, man. I mean, we're going to get into it, but talk to me about, which one's your favorite if you had to pick one? Which one is your Sting?
Oh, I'm with you there. The Crow Sting is and always will be my favorite. He really reinvented himself, and he took the character to heights he'd never seen before. And I think you're right. He probably did make all of the fans forget about that nice guy Sting with the spiked blonde hair and the flashy face paint. I got to say, this was probably one of the greatest amalgamations of a character ever in professional wrestling.
Oh, for sure. And we've seen characters adapted before. No doubt. If you've been a fan of this business for longer than 15 minutes, you've seen all kinds of Hollywood influences seep their way into the world of pro wrestling because, let's face it, it's only normal. It's what we do. It's what the business has done for years because the business of pro wrestling is a microcosm of the world around you. And that world is often the entertainment world. It's sometimes political. It's sometimes socioeconomic. It's sometimes controversial. It's sometimes, from a book. It could be anything. And obviously, comic books are going to play a role in this. And, the entertainment industry is going to play a role in this. That's just part of the deal. That's what it is. And it's like that in I would believe, any entertainment medium, but especially the world of pro wrestling, because the people in the crowd are the same people who are watching those TV shows, who are watching those movies, who are buying those comic books. So you give them something that they already love, they are more apt to love the thing that you're giving them right in front of them. And I think that went a long way in reigniting Sting's popularity with fans, setting him off in terms of his career once again, lighting that dude on fire and just making him the hottest commodity in the business. Before we get too deep in the weeds, I got to hit the rewind button. And this is maybe not the easiest thing for you. It's not for me either to a large extent because where we are in the South, yes, we're in the Mid-Atlantic region of these United States, Jim Crockett territory, always has been, always will be. We did not grow up watching, all California Championship Wrestling. We didn't know who Power Team USA was. We didn't know who the Freedom Fighters were. But I'll tell you this, I knew who they were because of what's come to be known as the Apter magazines, the pro wrestling magazines that Bill Apter was the head of, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Inside Wrestling, too many to name, and I've still got a box full of them in my closet, man. I love those mags. But that's where I started seeing photos of Hellwig and of Borden together. As first it was Power Team USA, Freedom Fighters, and then the Blade Runners. That's when I really started seeing their pictures and started reading press on them. When were you first exposed to Jim Hellwig and Steve Borden?
Honestly, it was many years later, watching documentaries and videos talking about how Sting and the Ultimate Warrior got their start. Unfortunately, I was not able to come across any of that material you just mentioned. And I really regret it because, looking back now, it's so fascinating to see where these guys came from. You have to start somewhere. And I know just watching documentaries here, the past couple of days, it was a real struggle for, Sting and the Ultimate Warrior because, like back then, it was tough to break into the business. You really had to put a lot of hard work and determination into yourself and in the ring. And I've heard other stories about hard times for guys, trying to come up in the business like Mick Foley, even Ric Flair, just having to do things that you didn't want to do. But if you wanted to make it big in the business, you had to suffer a little bit, to earn your stripes. And someday, hopefully you would make it to the big time. And that's what these guys did eventually.
Paying your dues, baby. Right? It's all about paying your dues. It's all about paving your way, making a name for yourself, putting yourself out there. And you and I both over the years have seen a lot of cats who tried. They really tried. But either they didn't have the aptitude for the business, they didn't have the body for it, a combination of both, or they just never got an opportunity. But I would say that Sting and the man who would later become the Warrior, the Ultimate Warrior, they both had a leg up because of their bodies. Because it was hard to look at either one of these two guys and not see a star in the making, not see a future star. I mean, I don't know if there was ever a time when someone didn't look at either one of these two guys and say, oh my God, he might have something. But here's the deal. The difference, dude, is this. In the 1980s, a lot of guys had bodies, right? Because it was a body business. We've known that for years. WWE was a body company. Okay, in some regards, they still are, right? But it was a body business. And if you didn't have 6'3" plus, 260 some pounds and up, then you weren't going to get a shot and you weren't going to get a second look. So yeah, Sting and Warrior both had a leg up over anyone else coming in before them or after them, to be honest. They would always get a first look because of the way they looked. And that was a good thing. But where you start to see the separation, and Warrior's been gone for a while. I don't mean any disrespect. I know you don't either. But dude, the difference between Warrior and Sting is night and day. I think it's very fitting that in those old Blade Runner pictures, Sting had the bleach blonde hair almost white and Warrior's hair was jet black. It was night and day. I know that sounds silly, but two sides of the same coin. Warrior just didn't have that. He didn't have the aptitude for this. He became a star. But dude, he did not have the psychology. He didn't have the ring skills. He was in right place, right time. Sting was in a great spot too. And, I've heard the argument made over the years, had the roles been reversed, had Sting went to WWE first, what would have happened had Warrior went to NWA instead of Sting at that time? Dude, Warrior would have been a blip on the radar, and he would have lasted a couple, 2 or 3 years. And I'm just being honest, because he couldn't go. And even Lex Luger, to his credit, learned his craft. And Lex, at the end of the day, was not a great worker either, all due respect. And he'd probably tell you that too. But at least Luger came up in the territory system and learned under some good guys, and Dusty had his ear, and they did the best they could with Lex, right? But I don't think Warrior would have succeeded at all in Jim Crockett Promotions. But the difference is, no matter where you put Sting, Sting would have gotten over and he would have become a star. Yes?
Oh yeah, you were talking about having great bodies in the business, WWE. I like to add to that. I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was talking about professional wrestling. He said, he really liked the sport, and he mentioned the fact that if he had had a second body, he would have been a professional wrestler, which I thought that was pretty cool for him to say. And, like you said, entertainment blurs the lines, between these two genres. And to go back to, the difference between Sting and the Ultimate Warrior, yes, of course, Sting was more technically sound. I think he put a little more time and effort in than Hellwig did. And, rest in peace, Warrior. But, yeah, it was, like you said, night and day. And I like the fact that you mentioned their hair colors. It almost resonated in the years to come, the difference between the two. And it's just, you really can't compare the two because Sting's career ended up being so much more fulfilling, I thought.
Absolutely. And he really did come into his own. As we know, the story goes is that the Blade Runners debuted in Bill Watts' UWF, right? And Hellwig left for greener pastures, ended up at World Class Championship Wrestling, became the Dingo Warrior, went to WWE after that, became the Ultimate Warrior. We know how all that ended up. Sting stayed behind, went to the UWF, stayed in the UWF, I should say. Jim Crockett buys the promotion in 88, 87, 88. And Dusty Rhodes saw something in Sting. And brother, when you got Dusty Rhodes on your side, if Dusty Rhodes be for us, who can be against us? Okay? Because... You're right. I mean, listen, I'm sorry. It's just, you're talking in terms of who had the most stroke during that time and who knew a star from a mile away. I mean, you could have called Dusty the Star Maker in a lot of regards because he knew, dude, he saw something in Big Bubba that no one else saw. And it was because of Dusty that Big Bubba became one of the best big men in the business and one of the most underrated big men in the business, in my estimation. And his work as a big boss man, dude. Bubba could fly around that ring. He could bounce like crazy, like a cruiserweight. Very athletically get to that guy. And you wouldn't think that about him, but Dusty saw it from day one. So it's not surprising, shouldn't be surprising to any one of us, that Dusty took one look at Sting and said, okay, baby, you got a body, but what else you got? I mean, and honestly, he saw something because one look at Sting's facials and one look at Sting in the ring, you could say, wow, this kid is green as grass, but I think there's something here. It's obvious. If you go back and watch any of those matches, and we can't forget about Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. He was with Hot Stuff Incorporated, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, Hollywood John Tatum. Sting was in that band of, I guess you'd call them misfits. Rick Steiner was in there. Missy Hyatt was in there. And that's sort of where he sort of gained his start, I would say, after Hellwig left the group and left the promotion. But when Dusty got his hands on him, he said, okay, I can do something with this guy. And dude, it seems like overnight we're talking about Sting in this stable and Sting trying to make his way in the world and getting in front of a crowd that had never seen him before. And I remember, because you and I are older fans, right? And I remember when Sting came into Jim Crockett Promotions, it was like, I mean, we already had flamboyance because we'd seen Adrian Street. We knew Dusty. We had seen other guys be, sort of flaunt themselves and put themselves out there and be loud and boisterous. Michael P.S. Hayes. We'd seen the Freebirds. We'd seen guys be boisterous and loud and look at me kind of thing. And that's what you need in pro wrestling. You need guys who want to put themselves out there. And then here comes Sting. And dude, he's beating his chest and he's howling at the camera. And they'll tell you, man, that a lot of times he would forget what he was supposed to say. So instead, he would just beat his chest and scream at the camera and be laughing. And the crowd's like, oh my God, I love this guy. Dude, it feels like a breath of fresh air, doesn't it?
Yeah, so kind of by accident, forgetting his lines, that's what made him his signature star. Yeah, the first time that I ever saw Sting, I was flipping the channels one night, and I came across this wrestling promotion that I'd never heard of. It's kind of strange, that I'd never been exposed to UWF before, but I found it one night, and I was watching just for a minute, and I saw Eddie Gilbert out there with like his faction, and I didn't know who these guys were. I'd heard of Eddie Gilbert, but I didn't know, too many of the other guys and gal, Missy Hyatt.
Mm-hmm.
He introduced this guy named Sting, and he got into the ring, and I looked and I was like, wow, this guy, he's pretty unique. He's got the blonde spiked hair and the face paint. He's got a great body. He looks like he could go somewhere in this business. And yeah, when Jim Crockett Promotions bought out UWF, and Sting became, an employee of that company, and then Dusty took a look at him and said, like you said, I can do something with this kid. I think there's something there. He's raw, but yeah, what an honor to be picked, kind of handpicked by Dusty Rhodes, a legend in that time. He'd already made his name in the business many times over. So, I mean, Sting must have been on cloud nine, getting attention from Dusty Rhodes, and Dusty telling him, I think you can do something in this sport.
And, not for nothing, talking about Hot Stuff Incorporated, Sting was surrounded by some really smart guys. And Eddie Gilbert was, and I say the words going behind his back in a good way, because it doesn't happen often in this business where it's a positive, but he would tell guys when Sting wasn't looking or listening that this kid's going to be a megastar. I mean, Eddie saw it. And dude, props to Eddie. Eddie, again, use the word underrated. An underrated mind in this business. I mean, he's been gone for a long time, but Eddie was a truly smart guy and very talented as well. As we know, the son of the late Tommy Gilbert, referee Tommy Gilbert as well. So, yeah, Eddie Gilbert was one of my favorites because he was such a good, cocky heel. But, dude, no matter what talent Sting was surrounded by in that stable, Sting stood out like his sore thumb. He's over 6 feet tall, spike haircut, painted neon green and all this stuff. And I remember seeing pictures of him in the aftermags and thinking, holy God, it's like which one of these things doesn't belong, one of these things is not like the other kind of thing, I mean, dude, it was like, I don't know, it's hard to explain. You'd have to see those pictures to believe it. But again, he turned heads, and he turned Dusty's head, and it was, okay, let's see what you got. Put up or shut up. Let's see if he's got what it takes. And man, I mean, I don't know if overnight sensation is appropriate here, but when he debuted on World Championship Wrestling in 1987, and Shivani's interviewing him after his match, and he's howling at the camera, and he's got that paint and that face and that hair, my God. I mean, and then to see him in the ring, and you're like, okay, this kid is, I mean, he's got hops like Michael Jordan. He's hanging in the air, dude. This is insane. I mean, you could see a mile away, even as a kid, and we both were still not smartened up. Neither one of us knew the whole thing was a work. We didn't know, probably wouldn't know that for a few years to come, right? But we both we could see from a mile away, man, this kid's got something. And you could see that he was naturally talented and athletically gifted already.
Not only did he turn Dusty's heads and other people's heads in the business, he also turned many fans' heads, like wait a minute, is this guy for real? Had a lot of athletic ability. He could work in the ring very well. And, I'm sure, besides other guys besides Ric Flair, probably said the same things. He's like, this guy's got it. He can only, his star can, who knows where it's going to go from here. And I also like the fact that Sting was very loyal to whoever he was working for. You really have to respect a guy who's willing to maybe possibly turn down more money to jump ship and go somewhere else to stay where he's at and build a reputation and maybe cultivate his personality with the fans of that region. And over time, it really worked for Sting because, he became the franchise of WCW, and I think the icon really fits. That's a great moniker for him.
No doubt about it. And let's face facts, man. As much as Dusty played a part in this, and I don't think he gets enough credit for that, I mean, the second guy who does get a lot of credit, and as well he should, is the guy that put Sting on the map, and that's the Nature Boy. March 27th, 1988, talking about going from zero to hero overnight. Sting faces Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, the first ever Clash of the Champions. they ran up against, WrestleMania 4. And this is free TV, and did a huge number. Because the fans saw something that I don't know that they had seen in a very long time, not since Barry Windham maybe. Had they seen such a young, good-looking kid who had a world of fire, a heart of fire, charisma, intensity, all the above, and then some, and just stand toe-to-toe with Flair and take his best and keep coming back. Dude, I remember watching this match, and as a kid, again, I'm completely sucked in. I'm thinking, well, Sting can't win because a world champion couldn't be just Sting. They'd have to give his real name, right? Because a world champion's Ric Flair. Like, that's how in tune I was. You know what I mean? Like, you couldn't just, here's Sting, here's Sting. It had to be, here's the blah, blah, blah Ric Flair, here's the blah, blah, Tully Blanchard. Because that was the example set for years. And, it's silly now looking back on it, but at the time I remember being so completely in tune with what a world champion was supposed to look and sound like because of the example that Flair set. And guys like Nick Bockwinkel in the AWA, that when I looked at guys like Hogan, I'm like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what's that supposed to be. And then Sting, as much as I loved him, I thought, well, I like him, but he's not going to be world champion. That's not who he is. Man, if I knew then what I know now, I would have been, more than upset that he lost that match. And I was, because it was a silly judge's decision at the end. And it's all work, kids. It's just pro wrestling, silly pro wrestling. But the fact is, during the course of this match and after this thing was over, Sting went from being potential and being possibility to being obviously the next guy. I mean, it was clear to me and to the rest of the world in that moment.
Yeah, and the time leading up to this match, I really, of course, was pulling for Sting. Ric Flair, I think back to this match, and, everybody, of course, knows that it was the coming out party for Sting. He really launched himself into the stratosphere with this one. And I'd like to read some comments by Flair after the match, the Clash of Champions won. We were up against WrestleMania. This was our opportunity to take a big shot at them, and Sting was right there for everything. He didn't miss a spot. He had that $1 million look, the paint, the blonde spiked hair. To take all of that and roll it into a package, and with Sting being such a great guy, he became one in a million. You could tell people liked him, and after that match, he was golden. It was a home run. I really liked wrestling him, and I think he liked wrestling me. And to hear those comments from the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, possibly the greatest of all time, in my mind he is. Sting, imagine what he was thinking at the time. He had to have been, like, oh, wow, can't believe that we just had this match and the Nature Boy Ric Flair is, saying this stuff about me and him. To be mentioned with Flair, that's one thing, but, to have Flair compliment you this much, it's got to be really satisfying.
The biggest difference between Rick, and I'm with you, Rick is the GOAT. I don't care what anyone says. I could care less. But in Rick's position, he, by all rights, could have been like another world champion who just wanted to be fed all the contenders so he could look good. Rick was smart enough to know that I'm only going to be able to do so much with the guys that are here. I can only work Steamboat so many times. I can only work Wyndham so many times. I can only work any number of world title contenders that came along during those years so many times. He and Dusty could only feud for so many times until the fans would go, okay, what else you got? When Rick looked at Sting, and like you said, he saw the charisma. He saw a baby face. Dude, when you're the top heel, you want a great baby face because not only is it good for you, it's good for him too. Because he doesn't have to win in the beginning. He doesn't have to win at all, really. But man, it's your job to shine him up. And, the problem I think with a lot of today's pro wrestling stars is the fact that a lot of heels just want to be cool. They want to look cool. They want to sound cool. They always want to be cool. And I'm like, it's not your job to be cool. It's your job to shine up the babyface. That's why you're here. Rick knew what his job was. Guys like MJF and AEW, he knows what his job is. His job is to be the smarmy, cocky heel who at the end of the day is a coward because that's what a heel should be. And I know there's differences. I know you got your Road Warriors and your Brock Lesnar's and, your Mark Henrys, and you've got those big time vicious heels that would never run from a fight. But the problem with that is that if they're always like that, they never run, they're not going to be heel for very long because people respect that and they'll start popping for it. So heels should always be cowards. And Flair knew that. And he saw it. And he knew his job was to shine up Sting to look like a brand new silver dollar. And that was it. That's what he was supposed to be. He ended up shining the guy to become a gold coin. So it's even better because he knew, hey, Sting's young. I can get some quality matches out of this kid and not only probably extend my own career, let's be honest, but I can help him in his as well. Dude, it's a win-win on both sides. But yeah, they came out of this, and Flair would be the first guy to tell you that he'll be very humble and say, I didn't have to carry this guy at all. He more than stepped up because he did. Because as we said, you could just see it from a mile away that Sting had the it factor. And look, folks, we've done deep dives on albums. We've done deep dives on movies and told you about each and every scene and then broke down each and every scene as it happened. I'm not going to say we're going to do that with Sting's entire career here because we're obviously going to gloss over some stuff as we go. But we had to kick off with this thing with Flair because it obviously put him on the right path and put him on the path to superstardom and made him the character that we all knew and loved for years in that company. But without Flair, it never would have happened.
Looking back, this was ultimately, no pun intended on his former partner, Ultimate Warrior. This was ultimately Sting's most important night of his life in the sport of professional wrestling. And Flair, I think he almost foresaw this. They were up against WrestleMania, which that was pay-per-view. So, to go out and have this kind of match on free television when you're competing with a pay-per-view wrestling extravaganza up north, to me, that shows that you care more about the craft and you're not just trying to go out there and entertain the fans. You want to really, work with this guy and have a great match. So, the fans will be entertained anyway. It's not just going out there punching and kicking. You're telling a story in the ring, and this guy's told one of the greatest stories ever in 45 minutes. And yes, I hated the way that it ended. I was really wanting Sting to win. He had Flair in the Scorpion Deathlock. I don't know if it was called that at the time, but he had him in a submission hold, and Flair was, I was like, just tap out, Rick, come on, tap out. But Flair, to his credit, he held on until the time limit expired. So, yeah, at least Sting didn't lose. That was very crucial in building up Sting at that time. I love Flair because unlike somebody else we were, mentioned before, he was willing to give other guys spots and matches and make them look good and build them up. He was willing to work with another guy and maybe, give him the spotlight. It's kind of like with another guy who was the world champion in the other promotion, you didn't really see that a lot.
Yeah, as I said, Hogan, it's just caught for what it is. Hogan was fed challengers to make him look good because Hogan had a very limited moveset. And just call it like I see it, Sting didn't have that. And dude, talk about things that could have been. As we said before, Sting had opportunities to go to WWE through the years when he was working for Crockett and then later working for Ted Turner in WCW. He had chances to go. He didn't want to because he considered the number of dates that WWE worked per year versus WCW, and it was way more than he was working at that time. He wanted to be home with his family, which he was able to be working in WCW. And, his kids be the first one to tell you, Dad never missed a thing. He didn't miss a practice. He never missed a game. He never missed a regional. He never missed anything, ever. He was always there for his family. He would not have been able to do that working for Vince at that time. So, yeah, he didn't go. But, brother, if he had, goodbye, Hogan. You wouldn't need him. Hogan would have been the extra cherry on the sundae when you've already got the sundae and the cherry. You wouldn't need another cherry. It's pointless, right? He's like the third piece of bread on a sandwich. What do you need that for? For some reason, I got food analogies going, but you get the point. He wouldn't have.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have needed him at the time because Sting would have been more than enough. He would have been all you would have needed as a top guy.
So again, you have to respect Sting for being a family man and wanting to be there with them through special moments in their lives. And like you said, it was a hectic schedule with WWE at the time, and probably still is. On the road probably almost every day. So, I'm glad Sting was able to have a life outside of professional wrestling. And, I know that meant the world to him.
And, we talk about Sting's matches. I mean, of course, the match with Flair, you can't do this show without talking about that. It's impossible. But, talk about, and we can just breeze through these because there's several. But, one of the feuds that I recall, and I got myself caught up again, and it's, again, night and day. Watching the matches he had with the Great Muta, after watching the match at the Clash with Flair, brother, I don't even know how to compare that. The classic old school NWA, Jim Crockett pro wrestling, move for move, hold for hold, takedown for takedown, stay on the mat, work a body part, build yourself back up, get the heat, get the comeback, take it home, okay? Well, that storytelling 101 in pro wrestling, right? Dude, when he faced Muta, the bell rang, and if you go back and watch those matches, it's like watching a match in 2020. There's no lockup. They just start kicking. They start kicking and punching and splashing and running and flipping and off the top rope and fist fighting and out of the ring and back in the ring, and they take it home. And it's a 2020 match. I'm not saying I don't like that because it's kind of what we're used to now, right? But, dude, watching Sting go from Flair in that mode to Muta in that mode, it shows his versatility, but it also shows that he could do anything. He could work anybody. Dude, he worked Mick Foley, and Foley was chomping at the bit to work with Sting because he knew he could bring something to the character. He could bring Sting an edgy challenger because, as we know, Sting would become world champion. He would win the belt from Flair. He would be on his way to becoming the face of the company, as we said before. And Foley saw something in him and said, oh, I got to work with him. And it wasn't about him working with the world champion. It was about, I could help Sting tell some great stories. And man, did they tell some good stories. It was the same kind of idea that we saw later with Foley and Shawn Michaels in WWE, where you're like, they're going to feud for the title? But man, it made sense with Foley and Sting. I mean, they had some good matches, man.
Yeah, I didn't know how intelligent Foley was at the time. Just looking at his character, Cactus Jack, I didn't think this guy was, too intelligent. But, he proved me wrong, in the years to come. And yes, it was unusual for two guys like, himself and Sting to get together and, wrestle over a world title. But, I think they made it work, really well. And, yeah, both guys really wanted to go out there and give the fans what they paid their hard-earned money for, and they were successful. Mick Foley, I've always loved this guy, and he's changed his characters over the years, kind of like Sting, and I think it worked out really well.
Yeah, and they paired up great together, and and the thing about Foley is, look, let's call it for what it is. Foley wants to get paid, and Foley wants the work, obviously. But Foley knows he's good too. So it's not just about the money, kids. Don't take that wrong. But Foley knew he could do business with Sting. He knew he could do business with Shawn. He knew he could do business with Taker. And people laughed at that. People laughed at all three and said, ha ha, whatever. And then you saw it and you're like, crap, that was a good match. Because Foley was the yin and yang. You need a guy like that. I mean, it's like, it'd be like, watching Buzz Sawyer versus Drew McIntyre. You're like, wait a minute, what? But dude, Buzz would bring something entirely different to the table that Drew's not seen before. To me, it'd be it's the same thing as Sting and Foley, where you're like, wow, that looks so different from a mile away, but it caused Sting to go to different parts of his character and go like, all right, you want to fly off the top rope and go to the floor? I can do that too. Watch this. And, putting himself in harm's way, essentially, to sort of bring his game up to Foley's and bring that intensity level up. I think it was good for Sting in the end. I don't know how good it was with the Horseman angle. I look back on that now and I think to myself, Sting is a Horseman? Really? Like, I don't know. At the time, I guess it was cool to think that the Horseman had turned a corner and they're good people now. You know, I'm a kid. I'm basically still a kid at this time. I mean, it's, you know, this happened in 91, but dude, look back at 91. Did you know anything about life in 91? Because I sure didn't. So,
Yeah.
I mean, still kids.
Yeah,
but...
not much. I had a lot to learn then, and you know, the Horseman turning face, that was weird. And so many years before, you know, the group began as a bunch of heel guys. They'd run around, run roughshod on everybody, and I hated them. I hated Flair most of all because it seems like he was world champion for like 5 straight years, maybe longer. Every time he lost the title, he would get it right back.
Right.
But see Sting with the Four Horsemen, it was awkward, but it grew on me. You know, I kind of grew to accept it, and in my opinion, this was good for Sting because it put another layer to his character. To be with the Four Horsemen, that was the faction of the day right there.
Oh yeah.
Sting probably had to think that this was an honor to be in a group of guys this well known. And these guys were already, you know, well known in the business and had, you know, legendary status to begin with. So, yeah, this could only help Sting.
It fleshed him out, right? It fleshed out his character even more so because dude, it did look weird. You're right. The whole thing looked weird. I mean, and Sting cleaned up good, as they say, right? I mean, he looked different, but I remember that promo that night because Sting had become number 1 contender to Flair's world title. So they're in the ring that night together, came out together as the Horsemen, and Ole cuts that promo where he's basically saying, "We're fixing to kill you." Like, right? Just it's such good stuff. And he's basically saying, "Well, it's over, pal. You never should have got number 1 contendership because that ain't gonna fly here. Now we're got to kill you." And dude, it was so awesome. The look on Sting's face. Dude, it was like a kid. He was like, "No, come on." Dude, it crushed me. So I'm like, "Oh, they're going to kill him." No! Like, you just knew it was coming, right?
What was Sting supposed to have done? Not tried his best to, you know, get to the top there? I mean, you know, of course, it's awkward to be in that position, but if I'm Sting, you know, I want to try to be the best. I want to try to reach the top of the mountain. And the only way to get there is to go through Ric Flair, who was world champion at the time. And, of course, Flair, you know, the consummate heel, he didn't appreciate the fact that Sting was the number 1 contender. Right. And then being in the same group, you know, that it was too conflicting. So, of course, the Horsemen had to take care of business. And, yeah, Sting was the victim here. And I remember when Ole and Arn were holding him, and Flair, you know, pointing his finger at him right in his face, he said, "I tried to buy you some time, punk." Right. And I was like, man, you know, come on, dude. Yeah, I have to admit that was cool, but I really hated it for Sting because I was wanting to see Sting win the world title, and it wasn't going to happen now because it didn't seem like it was going to happen now because, you know, the Horsemen were going to gang up on him and probably injure him. That's what I was thinking. And there was no way Sting was going to, you know, be able to accomplish his goal.
Right, and I love the way you put that because, like, they all came to the ring together, and then suddenly Flair's like, "I try to buy some time," and you're like, "What? What do you mean?" Like, as a kid, that was maddening, both maddening and just wholly upsetting at the same time. Because, listen, no matter how much we boo Flair, we really wanted to like him because he was so fun and he was so cool, but. You know, again, seeing him turn on Sting, because out of the two of them, I'm going to cheer Sting. It's just how it's going to happen. I mean, had I been a few years older, maybe not, but no, I'm cheering Sting at that time, dude. There's no way I'm not. So, yeah, it was bizarre, but I agree with you. I think it added something to him, and it widened his range, I believe. It set the table for the World Championship reigns to come. And again, he's on his way, if not already, becoming the face of the company. Fierce loyalty to WCW. As we said, the face of the company, always the guy, the one that they sent out for PR, the one they sent to do media. He was great for that company. I mean, they would send Flair and they would send Sting, and they were awesome because they were both well-spoken, highly intelligent individuals and could talk to anybody and knew how to schmooze and grease palms and shake hands and kiss babies. And, you know, when those two were come through the front door, you probably knew who Flair was. But if you didn't know who Sting was and you're some sort of corporate sponsor, you're immediately taken back by how how polite the man is and how smart he is and how well spoken he is, you're like, wow, this is pretty cool. I think you're more apt to do business with that company. And speaking of that company, Greg, we know what's coming down the road is that Ted Turner comes on board. Crockett closes up shop. NWA, what we knew as NWA is gone. That promotion is no more. And we start seeing WCW. And that's where Sting truly became, and we've already hit that mode here to a certain extent, but WCW became Sting's stomping grounds. As much as Sting was WCW, Undertaker was WWE, this was Sting's deal. And as Taker emerged in WWE and it became sort of his playground, his yard, as they say, WCW became Sting's yard. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. A game-changing situation, and as much as the first Clash match with Flair was a game changer, dude, talk to me about the arrival of the NWO, and it was our premiere episode, man, and we've covered it quite a bit here, but I mean, you're Sting, you're watching this stuff go down. These guys are red hot. Hogan's reignited his career, and you're sort of still doing the same thing. You're still popular, but it's obvious that the anti-heroes are getting over like never before. Stone Cold Steve Austin is, he's not quite happening yet in WWE, but it's on the way, and the crowd mentality is changing, and suddenly they want to cheer the guys who are breaking the rules, and they want to love those guys, and you're still wholesome babyface Sting. Dude, talk about the change that guy went through when the NWO came to town.
The metamorphosis of Sting into the Crow character was fantastic, man. From the beginning, I was on board with this because the movie The Crow with Brandon Lee, that was an awesome movie. So to kind of steal from that and to put that on Sting, that was a great move. And I watched a documentary where Sting's talking about at this time and this place, he saw the trend was changing. That he had to change with the times. And this was the perfect moment for him to change his character, and what a change. The NWO came on the scene in WCW and just took over. And, of course, the colors were black and white. So here goes Sting. He's going to change his face paint to black and white to kind of reflect the change in WCW. And, I have to admit, I really missed the NWA when it went away and WCW came to town, or they changed the name to WCW. But, I mean, when this all started happening, I was on board with WCW, and I really liked what they were doing. And Sting's character was just phenomenal. He was kind of like The Undertaker of the WWE. It was very mysterious and dark and brooding. I loved the mystery, not knowing what he was going to do next. You would see him up in the rafters of the Coliseum, wherever they were at. He was just sitting there watching the action, watching everything unfold in front of him. And just to see him show up, that was great in and of itself.
And to go back to a point you just made about WCW and being on board, I was kind of the same opinion. Now look, I lost interest when Crockett left. When Crockett Promotions closed up shop, I did. I'm not going to lie. But if given the choice of watching WWF or WCW, I watched WCW. WCW felt like our promotion, didn't it? Because, dude, we're not in New York. We're not in Jersey, right? I mean, WWF never felt like my promotion. WCW did.
Yeah, WWF was more bright lights, big city, kind of pomp, and, all that stuff that Vince liked to incorporate into his show, which didn't really appeal to us down here. WCW, was more kind of like NWA, not as good nearly, but, yeah, unlike you, when it first began, I wasn't really in tune with it, but when they started bringing, these other guys in, and they hit us with the NWO, so that was, that's what drew me back. And to have Sting to be there and oppose these guys, that was it for me. I was, back in. They drew me back in with this feud, and it turned out to be one of the greatest feuds I've ever seen.
It was the stuff of legend. It doesn't matter, kids. Quick lesson for you. Stay tuned. There's more to come. If there's no point in having a big time heel faction if you don't have a big time babyface to take them on. It's pointless. And that's what some companies don't get and still don't get. It's, you can have matching t-shirts, a catchphrase, a hand gesture, the whole nine. You can have as many limos as you want. But brother, if you don't have red hot baby faces to work, you're going to get old, which is what happened to the NWO. They got stale quick because in the end they crushed everyone. And they're going to crush Sting to a certain regard too, because that's what they did. And it was allowed to happen, and it was silly. Not good for business. In the end, we know what happened to that company. It's not good for business, folks. But you need a red-hot babyface. The Horseman would have been good. The Horseman would have been very good and very entertaining. But the Horseman was great because of Dusty. I'm sorry, it's how I feel. And I love Rick to death. But I think Rick would tell you, without Dusty, what were we? Right? Without the Rock and Roll Express, what were we? Without Barry Windham, what was the Horseman? Without, Nikita Koloff, Wahoo McDaniel, what was the Horseman? You needed red-hot baby faces to push that faction back on its heels, as it were. That's what you had to have. And, the NWO had that with Sting, and then some.
Scott Hall was the one that influenced Sting into changing his character to morph into that Crow persona. And, to have the guy on the opposite side to be the one to give you that idea, I thought that was kind of ironic. But, great minds, think alike. Scott Hall knew that this would be good for not only the NWO, but for Sting. It would revitalize his career, almost be like he was being reborn in this moment, going out there and opposing the NWO, taking them all on by himself, kind of like Dusty did with the Horsemen years before in the NWA. The fans went nuts for this. I mean, we all ate it up, I remember.
And it's funny because this was the time period when you and I were watching a lot of the Nitros and Raws together. And we've told that story here on the show before, but basically it was you and I in a room full of, I don't know how many guys, I don't know. At the lowest point, there was maybe 4 of us. At the highest, there was maybe 7 or 8 of us, maybe more. When you factor in girls as well, that we're all just kind of hanging out watching the show. But we would flip between Raw and Nitro, and every time we kind of expected Sting at the end of Nitro, because that's usually when it happened. And as we said in the NWO episode, the story here is great because WCW did something that they didn't often do. They took their time. They were patient. Sting didn't work a match in a year and a half. They put him in the rafters. They changed his paint. He changed his paint, and all the Crow stuff is huge kudos to Scott Hall.
By the time that, Sting came into the ring and exploded on the NWO, it had reached a boiling point for the fans. They were ready for this. They had been kind of anticipating what Sting was going to do. Was he going to join the NWO, or was he going to stay loyal to WCW? And, thankfully they had him, remain loyal to the company and go out and just destroy the NWO kind of in one night. He was, really knocking them down with the Scorpion Death Drop. That right there was amazing.
What a great moment. I gushed over that in the first episode because I can't help it because it's so good. It's so awesome. And I just love it so much just to see him out there. It's what every kid wants from an action film. It's what every kid wants from a comic book. To see the hero win against all odds. I'm a sucker for a happy ending. I always have been, always will be. I don't care for movies where in the last act of the film the villain wins, the hero's dead. I don't care for that. That's not a story to me. That's, especially if there's no sequel. Okay, that's it? That's what happened? The bad guy shouldn't win in the end. Pro wrestling works when, the heel never wins and the baby never loses. That's how this should go. There should always be a comeback. But the babyface needs to stand tall, not every time, but more often than not. Because if it's not about making the fans happy every single time, but you can only beat down the babyface so many times to where he will lose all credibility. It's what happened with CM Punk. Punk got beat by every challenger that came through the door. You know, Rock would beat him, he took off. Brock beat him, he took off. Triple H beat him, he took off. I mean, eventually, no one's going to respect you anymore. And even though they know it's choreographed, it's predetermined, it won't matter. Because they're going to say, Punk, who cares about Punk? That guy never wins. So they had to walk the line between, can we beat Sting? Do we not beat him? What do we do? And it's not like Sting was winning matches every single week. No, he was just getting the drop on this faction. Because it wasn't about making the NWO look foolish, kids. It wasn't about making them look stupid or easy to get the drop on. It was just, it's a band of thugs. It's a band of thugs and it's heels. Heels should not be made to look like they are indestructible. Heels are imperfect. Heels have egos and they have their own personal agendas that don't always jive with the group's agenda. Heels will turn on each other in a heartbeat, every man for himself. That's why heel factions can and will not last in the short term, because they can't. They're not engineered to last. There's a reason why the New Day is still around, because it's babyface. It's different. And it's a whole different mentality. Sting was the guy who was sticking up for the company and for the fans. Dude, I maintain to this day, it's one of the most well-executed storylines in the history of this business. And I think you can count them on one hand in terms of the most well-executed storylines that we've personally ever seen. Dude, for me, Sting versus NWO has got to be in the top 5.
I like the fact that on one hand, you have a guy that's trying to be traditional, then he morphs into a character that's non-traditional, and but he's still kind of like the babyface, the anti-hero. Almost like, I would compare it to Stone Cold's run with Vince McMahon and the corporation in WWE, which happened a little bit later on, if I'm not mistaken. These two feuds almost mirrored each other. And Sting, he was reborn in this feud with the NWO. The fans really got behind him, and it was just magic.
And it worked. I think that's the most important part of this whole conversation, dude, is that it worked. They took their time. They had a story to tell, and they told it. And it doesn't hurt a thing when the chief character of that story is already a good storyteller, and that's Sting. He knew how this was supposed to go. And people want to give Eric Bischoff credit, and that's fine. He deserves credit. I don't think he deserves all the credit for this. This had to be played out by the characters, and they were playing their roles in the course of the story. Sting did a phenomenal job. Hogan did his part. I'm not going to lie. He did his part. But to me, Sting is what made this thing click. If you didn't believe in Sting, if you just thought it was, well, this is silly. Why is he in the rafters? It's the dumbest thing I ever saw. But the fact that he looked cool helped. The fact that the whole Crow aesthetic helped him look the part and helped him get over, that's true. But at the same time, you had to believe in him. If you didn't believe in him, it would never work. But it more than worked. And it worked leading up to December of 1997. And that's the night when Starrcade took place. And I got to tell you, man, looking back on this match and watching it several times before and watching it several times in the past couple of days, and watching the build-up to this, the build-up was fantastic, as we all know. It's phenomenal. It's Sting. It's Sting versus Hogan, biggest night in Sting's career to that point, I believe, next to the first Clash against Flair. But this is a tough one for me because this match was nowhere near what we thought it was going to be. To this very day, they don't really know why. Eric Bischoff can't really tell you why. They don't really know. Because December 28th, 1997 was supposed to be the night that Sting dethroned the Hulkster, dethroned Hollywood Hulk Hogan, took the championship from the evil NWO and gave it back to WCW. Dude, this match is not good, to be honest. And Sting is on the record as saying that that day he was doubting himself. He was stressed out. Bischoff said the Sting was not very active before the match, not very talkative. Sting said he wasn't feeling it. A lot of stress, a lot of things in his mind. There was chaos in the back because there was a question of how the match was supposed to end. They didn't even know. And I'm like, what? What? I mean, look I give Vince McMahon a hard time, and I'm sorry. I believe it's well-deserved a lot of times, just my own point of view. But at least in that company, there is one voice saying yes or no. You didn't have that here. Bischoff was not the voice of reason. He didn't say yes. He didn't say, well, by God, that's what we're doing, that's it. He didn't. He didn't do it. They all were fumbling around, trying to figure out what to do, trying to figure out how to handle this. To my knowledge, no one pulled Sting aside and said, look, the 0 hour is here. Are you in this or not? Because if you're not in this, we're going to have to change the play. I don't want to change the play. You're our guy. We spent a heck of a lot of time getting you here. Let's get you there. Let's finish this off. Let's do what we came here to do. I'm not saying that didn't happen. If it did, I've never read that or heard that from anyone around. But, dude, talk to me about the end of this match. The end of this match was awful.
Yeah, it was very disappointing after the 1.5 build-up for Sting. And, this is what he wanted. He said, all I want is Hogan and the World Championship. And here was the opportunity, to bring it home for everybody, the fans in WCW, the fans behind Sting and the Crow. Yeah, this is what they had been leading up to. So it turned out to be really anticlimactic after what we'd all been through. We witnessed over that 1.5 years, and just a bad night the way it ended. But still, Sting, there was Sting with the belt, so there was maybe something to take away from this. Sting had finally gotten what he wanted, but just the way they got there wasn't pretty.
And they took the belt off of him the next night, which was, I think it was the next night. It might have been the following Monday. Either way, kids, the belt was taken, and they did something different, and Hogan ended up with the belt again. I'm like, it left a bad taste. And at the time, we tried to justify it and say, what's a fast count? Bret Hart comes running down the ring talking about it's a fast count. I'm like, that's not a fast count. I don't know what world you're living in. And I don't know. I guess they told Nick Patrick to count to 3. I don't really know. But how in the world you go into the biggest match of the year, or the biggest night in the company since you took over, since you got there, with the biggest star that your company has next to Ric freaking Flair, and you don't have a finish? I'm sorry. That, to me, dude, that is mishandling. That's poor handling on everybody's part. I think everybody had a little bit of blame to carry for that night. I will not lay all the blame fully on Sting. You listen, you need your guys, you need your talents to be in the right frame of mind. You need their head to be on straight. Now, you can't make it be on straight, but you sure can do something to help. If nothing else, you send Luger to talk to him. You send somebody to mediate the whole process and say, look, dude, are you okay? You want to vent to me? You want to talk about something? Are you having doubts? What's going on? I just don't feel like that happened. And I don't know why. And we don't have to spend all day on this, right? But, man, I remember us watching that and being so excited because we couldn't wait to see it. And it was, Greg, to your point, the guy ended up with the belt, okay? The storyline was paid off. And you know what? The crowd didn't care. They still popped. The ring filled up with the baby faces, and he was celebrating, and the crowd freaking loved it. And it's fine. It's not fine to a lot of degree, but the time, you know what? It's whatever. So I don't know, dude. Does that taint that night for you the way it ended? Does that ruin your memories of that, or do you remember more the outcome of him actually becoming champion more than anything else?
Yeah, it did kind of taint it for me. That's what I was thinking right before you said that. But the last image I do remember is Sting holding up the belt, and he said a few words in Spanish, I believe.
Right,
and
he
we
did.
Were like, what did he say?
Right.
And so yeah, just like the character being mysterious is like, why did he speak in Spanish? Had he learned that on that 1.5 year hiatus that he took, out from the ring? It was a real feel-good moment to see him finally get the title that we all thought he deserved. they had built the character up, so obviously he had to get that world championship, or it would have been all for what? Nothing.
Yeah, it turns out, folks, in the months he spent not in the ring, he was taking Spanish classes. That's good. So, yeah, I don't know what to say. I felt the same way, because when he finally spoke, we're like, hey, he's talking. And then it's like, what did he say? I'm like, you don't know? So, oh, awful. So anyone that followed Sting during this time, you know, there's a lot more to talk about. He ends up turning heel. I don't know. I didn't see that. Before the heel turn, he joins the Wolfpack, joins the NWO. Dude, listen, we covered this NWO episode. I get it. I know, and we'll do it here again, right? But it was a babyface version of the NWO at that time. But like I said, they still put the logo on him, and it was the same. Dude, that year and a half he spent getting to Starrcade 97, dude. That year and a half he spent getting there. And then they put the freaking logo on him and put him in the NWO. Like a year or two after. I'm like, what? I don't know, dude. I didn't feel it. It was fun. It was fun because, you know, maybe like you said before, Greg, maybe at the very least it put another layer to his character, maybe added to his story. But dude, talk to me about how weird that was, because you cheered for him. You still loved him, but like, it was just odd. It was like him with the Horsemen, wasn't it? Was it the same vein, maybe?
Yeah. That year and a half seemed like wasted time at that point. He was with an NWO faction, which he said, you know, he would never jump ship and go from WCW to anybody. But, you know, NWO at the time was kind of like, you know, its own entity. It's kind of like a separate federation. Yeah. But, you know, and here's, you know, Mr. Loyalty joining a face faction of the NWO after having spent, you know, all that time going against the NWO. And, you know, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. But, I mean, at the same time, it was cool. I thought the red face paint was a little too much. I thought it was kind of tacky. But, you know, this is Sting. I'm going to get behind this guy anyway.
I'm glad you said the word tacky. I think that's the word. Like, it was cool, but his face kind of got lost in that red and black, didn't it? You kind of didn't see him anymore, right?
Yeah. I mean, I love Sting, so, you know, that part, you know, I didn't really care for the face paint. I like the black and white much better. It's just more appealing to me.
And, you know, from a distance, what it kind of feels like? It kind of feels like, well, look, guys, we're not going to stop this NWO stuff anytime soon. So how can we extend this? I got an idea. Let's turn some on babyface and screw it, put Sting with him. I mean, you know, at that point, maybe it's time to stop the gimmick and do something different. I don't know. Call me crazy. But it's like, you can only go back to the well so many times. Like we said before with opponents. You can only go back so many times before the crowd no longer buys it. We know how this story is eventually going to end up. You know, long story short, very short compared to what came after. But like we said, Sting had his heel run. It didn't work for me. You know, we don't have to spend an hour on this, Greg, but what's your takeaway from that heel run? The Vampiro stuff and I don't know, dude. I wasn't feeling it. The Demon, that dude, come on, man. Bad. It just wasn't working for me. What'd you think about Sting as the heel? Had the Metallica sound-alike music. Did he actually have Seek and Destroy as his music at that time, I think?
Yes, he did. That was the cool part of it. But, yeah, trying to be heel for Sting was like Ricky Steamboat trying to be heel. You weren't going to believe it because he was on the side of the fans, been on the side of the fans for so many years, and such a nice guy before. I mean, yeah, he's turned into this Crow character, but you're still behind him. Just to see him try to turn heel, and to me, it's forgettable. Another one of those bonehead decisions that WCW made. And, you know, it's again, they were in the dark, and Sting's character was dark, but the guys behind the scenes were, you know, really in the dark.
Yeah, man. Dude, that's the best word of this, was forgettable. Highly, highly forgettable. Yeah, because no one talks about Sting's heel run. We did, because, you know, I guess, but I don't know. Like we said, man, how many people look back on that and go, oh, that was great? Nah, it was crap. It was crap. The whole thing was crap. You could just see that from a mile away for sure. So yes, we know how this story ends. In March of 2001, WWE buys WCW. Sting works the last match in the history of Monday Nitro against Ric Flair. And Flair had his shirt on, wasn't feeling good about himself. Sting was not entirely healthy at the time. They made the best of it. Flair wanted the last match to be with Sting. Sting felt the same way. A lot of mutual respect on behalf of both these guys. It was good in that respect. I won't tell you it was a 5-star match because it wasn't. Both guys will tell you that too. But I thought it brought a fitting end to Nitro.
To me, these two guys had come full circle. This is how Nitro began, with Sting and Flair on the first show. So why not have them do the last match on the last Nitro of WCW? You know, when Vince has taken over again, Vince has bought the company, and they had the simulcast, which was cool. I'm not going to lie. That was unbelievable. See Shane McMahon show up in WCW and be there on the Titantron. He pretty much pulled the rug out from underneath his old man, and he says, I bought WCW. And the look on Vince's face was priceless. Yeah, but the last match, Sting and Flair, yeah, it couldn't have asked for, a better match. But, yeah, you could have asked for a better executed match. But, it was just a feel-good moment, in my opinion. These two guys, they deserve to be the last match ever in that company.
Yeah, very fitting in for Nitro. I agree with that. I don't think either guy probably wanted to work anyone else during the course of that evening than each other. I think, like I said, if you're going to bring that show to a close all time, yeah, Sting versus Flair. How else do you do it? We know from here that he did not go to WWE. Again, I can't say that he had an opportunity because at that time, the way the contracts were structured, in Sting's words, there was no way he could go. He was sewn up. Even with WWE being out of business, Vince couldn't pick him up and bring him in. That's not how this was going to work. So this was 2001. It would be 14 years before we saw him. It's laughable now. But 14 years before we saw him in WWE. In that amount of time, he goes to TNA. He takes the anti-hero gimmick with him. He does a couple different things while he's there. He once again reinvents the character and starts doing Heath Ledger's Joker, which was bizarre. And he did a touch of it in WWE. Not a lot, just a touch. Again, I'll give Sting credit for trying to keep himself fresh. Be honest, how much of the TNA stuff did you watch when Sting was there?
I didn't get to see a lot of it, and that's my fault because, I was reluctant to tune into TNA, at first until you started telling me about it. Sting's there, Christians come in. It piqued my interest, so I tuned in and I started watching when they got a spot on TV, and I was looking at Sting, and I was really focused on him because here's a guy that had known and loved in years past in NWA and WCW. It really built up a reputation, and I just wanted to see how he was going to do in this new company. I have to admit, I did kind of like the Heath Ledger Joker character. I thought it was a nice new brand of personality that he incorporated into himself, another layer. I just remember seeing one spot backstage where he and Kurt Angle are talking, and Sting's just like he's laying down and he's relaxing, and Kurt Angle's standing there with a serious look on his face, and it just kind of it amused me to see that dynamic. And Kurt Angle's trying to be serious here and talk about the match, and here's Sting, he's just kind of laughing and having fun. I thought that made for good TV right there.
Like I said, I'm not in love with it. I'm with you though. I like the fact that it was something different. Sting can be a very funny guy. That's why longevity is important in this business, right? It's important in any line of work, but especially in the pro wrestling business, man. Sting's got longevity because he is able to reinvent himself. He's able to do things to keep himself fresh. And it's weird because sometimes during the reinvention process, he'll open his mouth and speak, and you're like, man, I kind of forgot how good this guy is. Good, and the best talents know how to keep themselves fresh, know how to keep themselves going. Chris Jericho is a great example of that, of a guy that constantly reinvents himself. It's like, well, I've done this thing for 6 months. I'm tired with it. Let's do something different. And he knows because the minute the fans have you figured out, that's the end. That's the end. No matter what anyone says, you will still be popular. You will maybe never be more popular than you are now, because you didn't take a chance. You didn't put yourself out there. Sometimes chances fail, obviously. Listen, the whole Crow thing could have fallen on its face, dude. WCW could have went down in flames after that. I don't know. I don't think it could have because, Sting is so freaking crazy talented at what he does and played the part so well. And as we said, all the key players in those roles were on their game, and that's a good thing for them and for that company. But yeah, his work in TNA was, is it Hall of Fame worthy? I don't know. TNA has its own Hall of Fame. I'm pretty sure they put him in it. I'm pretty sure they have.
He was actually the first one to be inducted into the TNA Hall of Fame.
That's right.
What I've been reading. And he's, at the time, I think he was the only one to be inducted into both TNA and then eventually WWE Hall of Fame. So I don't know if that's correct or not, but I think I read that.
No, I think you're right. I can't think of anyone else that would be included in that. Flair, I don't know if I would say maybe Flair's already been put in. I don't know. With now it's Impact Wrestling. I don't know how much credence they give to the TNA Hall of Fame. And, I haven't covered TNA on a full-time gig in a while because, to be quite frank with you, the Impact Wrestling show is really hard to watch. I'd be more inclined to give them a chance now because they picked up a whole batch of talent. And I've seen clips from the shows that look pretty good now, actually. So maybe the time's come to give Impact Wrestling another shot. And you know what? Kudos to them for longevity. Like we said, standing the test of time. They're still around. That says something.
And I was also doing a little, more research, and Dixie Carter paid compliment to Sting. She said that he was the first, acquisition that they brought in to get that company really established, and become well known. It makes sense, a guy like Sting. How can you not become well known after bringing him in?
Yeah, that's a good point. Dixie. People give Dixie a lot of crap, but Dixie knew what side her bread was buttered on. And here's what I mean by that. She knew what the talents brought to the table. And dude, there's been a lot of talk and rumors and innuendo, as they say, about, what was Dixie doing behind closed doors with some of these talents? I don't know. That's speculation for another time. I don't really care, to be honest with you. But she knew what the talents were doing for her company. They knew the recognition and the eyes they were. And look, TNA at the time was not blowing up the ratings. Let's just be honest. They weren't. They brought Hogan in. Sting was there. Jeff Hardy was there. Rob Van Dam came. I mean, all this other guys. You're like, hey, this looks like WWE 2.0 now, And it didn't do much for them. They never really made a huge impact, pun intended, after that. But yeah, she knew what Sting brought to the table, obviously. Speaking of Impact and then WWE, I'm going to throw a date to you. And I'm not going to ask you what this is because I would say you probably didn't know that you don't know it because honestly, I didn't know it either. January 11th, 2014, at a TNA event, Sting defeated Bully Ray in a TNA Live event. That is the last match that Sting won because Sting joined WWE as of 2015 at WrestleMania. Sting didn't win a match in that company. I don't know if I would say that the words black mark are kind of unfair to him because he wasn't responsible for his own booking, obviously. Dude, this company, as much as they highlighted him, they gave him that video package. They put him in a spot in the WWE 2K game that year. And they gave him all this press and all this attention. These cool spots where the lights would go out, the crow's sound would go off, and he would show up. And he looked great, and he was in great shape. Dude, in terms of wins and losses, they crapped all over this guy. Talk about that.
Yeah, this was WCW-ish because, it harkens back to the moment when, they spent all this time building Sting up, and then it kind of failed with the ending of the match. But he was still champion, but they took the belt back off of him not too long after that. So this felt like something that WCW would have done, when it was still alive. And it's just that again, that was wrong to me because I felt Sting probably should have at least won one match. Come on. I thought he should have won the match against Triple H, in my opinion. I don't know why Triple H went over on him. I mean, I've heard some things about this guy, but I don't know if that had anything to do with it. Of course, Sting, being the gracious guy that he is, shook hands after the match. So I thought, at least Sting is staying the man that he's always been. And it just didn't make a lot of sense to do all that for this guy and then have him, lose, not win a match at all.
I'm a little speechless on this because it was cool to see him. And dude, go back, and I know you have, go back and watch the clips. Anyone listening, go back and watch the clips of Sting arriving in WWE. It's good stuff. It's spine tingling, my man. The whole thing. He drops Triple H his first night back. The night when he saved Randy Orton, had the steel chair in his hand. I can't stop. Why? I love that. That's one of my all-time favorite, spots to rewatch. That look that Orton gives him, like, where'd you come from? It was so good. John worked with him. Dude, no one dislikes John Cena. I don't care what anyone says. I mean, he'll have his haters always, but to my knowledge, Sting got along with him great. John loved having him there. He had fun working with him. I get it. The whole Seth Rollins stuff down the road, Seth hurt him, essentially ended his career. Sting does not hold Seth responsible for that, even though when Seth put him in the buckle bomb, you can see Seth, he knew he hurt him. He went to whip Sting to the ropes, and Sting couldn't even run the ropes. He went down to one knee. And it was over after that. You can blame Seth all day long. You can say Seth hurt Finn Balor. He hurt Sting. Who else is he going to hurt? He's unsafe. That kind of stuff followed Seth for a while, if we're being honest. Dude, this is not ballet. This is pro wrestling. People get hurt. You don't want them to get hurt, but that's what happens. It's part of the game. Sting knew that going in. Sting knew it when he got in with Hellwig back in the day. He knew it then. He knows it now. I mean, it's part of the game. I don't blame WWE for that. But what I blame WWE for, you couldn't, like you said, Greg, you can't put the guy over at WrestleMania. So the match itself was good because Sting still has it. Obviously, he did. He looked really, really good. I think we can both agree on that. But, brother, when DX came down, followed by the NWO, dude, this was no longer about Sting versus Triple H. This was about WCW versus WWE. And if that's booked, the WCW guy is never going over. And what kills me is Sting wasn't WCW. That company had been gone for 14 freaking years at that point, man.
They were just trying to rehash, old history. And like you said, it took the focus off of Sting and Triple H and put it on DX and NWO. And, remember, Sting opposed the NWO, so why were they coming? It was the black and white. Why were they coming down in aid of Sting?
Right.
None of that ever needed to happen. It should have just been a straight-up match between Sting and Triple H. And in my opinion, Sting should have gone over. And, I mean, come on, man.
And, look, if you really wanted to do it, and you had to do it because you just have to do it because you're Vince, and why not, pal? Then why not put them in the red logos and play the Wolfpack music? Why was that so hard? Wouldn't that have made more sense?
Yes, indeed. I mean, that was the NWO faction that he was a part of, so it would have only made sense if you're going to do it, bring the Wolfpack down, in aid of Sting. But no, they did something that WCW would have done, which made no sense. And
they ruined it. I'm just going to be honest with you. They ruined it. There was a couple cool moments. Sting comes off the top rope to the outside, and you're like, oh my God, you're in your mid-50s. Don't do this. Did it anyway. Looked amazing. He broke Triple H's sledgehammer handle with the bat. And the first thing out of my mouth was, okay, what's the bat made out of? And I don't know if the fact that they never brought that up on commentary, at least I don't think they did, that's a crime. That should have been brought up. Someone should have said, Michael Cole, what's that bat made out of? What's he been using all these years? That would have been amazing. But they left that out. I mean, it's fine, whatever. But to me, it's hard to watch that back because it's just, the match was in broad daylight. They couldn't even wait till the sun went down. That match should have been semi-main event. I'm sorry, it should have been. If not the main event, semi-main event. They couldn't wait. They had to do it right then with the sun still freaking up, dude, because they're on the West Coast. Whatever. I mean, it's whatever.
That wasn't the first time that they had done something like that where you thought this match should have been the main event. They have it like really early in the program, and we're looking at each other like, really? They're going to have this match now? It should have been the main event after all that they had done to get prepared for this match.
Yeah, It's hard because there was opportunities. Like we said before, kids, he had chances to come before and he didn't want to take them. And you can't blame the guy. I mean, that night that they did the simulcast of Nitro and Raw together, right? Vince is basically burying the company, burying WCW. And you see what they did to Booker. They made Booker look like a joke in the beginning. They had Booker T backstage with The Rock, and The Rock says, "And who are you?" And I'm like, what? I mean, I like Rock. I don't love Rock. I like Rock. What do you mean? Who is he like that? And Rock's a babyface. You don't do that. That's an unwritten rule of this business, is that you don't diss a top babyface. If you're a babyface, I don't care if you're a heel, you give the guys props and then say, "What do you think you're doing here?" That's fine. But who are you? Sting was on the record at that time saying, the minute I saw that, I thought, well, I can't go because they're going to do that to me too. And basically they kind of did. And look, dude, you and I spoke about this kind of thing before. We've said on the show in the past, there's two different ideologies here. What we believe and what the guy in question believes. Is Sting happy with his WrestleMania moment? Yeah. Is he happy with his Hall of Fame induction that happened in 2016? Yeah, because he earned it. He should be happy. He earned it. He wasn't handed that. That wasn't a charity case. He earned that. He should be in it. For as much as that Hall of Fame, whatever it means to you, Greg, or me, or anybody else, he earned a spot in a Hall of Fame run by that dude. I'm sorry, he did. Okay? But even if he's happy, as fans, I'll ask you straight up, is there an asterisk by his name in terms of his career because of what happened under Vince McMahon? Or do you even think about that?
I would have to say there would be an asterisk beside his name because they totally ruined everything. Kind of like Vince McMahon said that Stone Cold ruined the night Mike Tyson showed up. Vince ruined this for Sting, and Sting deserved better than this. You know, after a phenomenal career, they WCW'd it, in my opinion.
Right.
And it's almost like Eric Bischoff showed back up and, you know, he made the decision, you know, okay, yeah, we're going to do this, and yeah, screw you, Sting. Sorry.
That's what we're doing. Sorry. Yeah, and look, man, at the end of the day, does winning and losing matter that much in pro wrestling? I mean, yes and no. It depends on it depends on the situation. It doesn't always matter, okay? It just doesn't always matter. Sometimes it doesn't matter at all, depending on the situation, right? I think it mattered here. It's what I feel. And I think Sting should have won this match. But, you know, I don't think he had a chance in the world against Hunter. I just don't think it was the right opponent. To me, and dude, this is another hour worth of a show right here. This should have been Sting and Undertaker. The two guys in the same locker room at the same time. There's a picture of them posing together. I mean, how in the world do you not book Sting and Taker? The dumbest thing ever. And you know what? I don't think I would have had a problem with Sting losing to Taker. I just don't. Sting losing to Hunter, different story. But, man, this should have been Sting versus Taker. Honest to God.
Yeah, that would have done more justice to Sting's career to have him go out against the dead man, you know, the Undertaker. And, of course, Sting, you know, he wanted to work the Undertaker, so, you know, why not go back? I mean, if you could go back, why not, you know, have him work the Undertaker at WrestleMania 31? It would have been a better match, I believe, and yeah, it just would have made more sense.
We talked about that for years, man. You and I, and every other fan who followed this business talked about that potential match for years. How amazing it would have been. You know, we're in the COVID era at this point. I don't know when people are listening to this show, but we're in the midst of it. And, you know, the theatrical matches, the cinematic matches are what WWE is doing right now. But, you know, people are talking about, well, what if Taker came out of his retirement for one more, Sting came back. It's a cinematic match. They could take breaks. It's not a continuous shot. It's edited and cut like a movie. It's filmed like a movie. It would be phenomenal. And you know what? It probably would be. But at this point, I don't want it. They had their chance. They had a chance to book this. They chose not to. And again, I don't lay that blame at Sting's feet. I lay it firmly at Vince McMahon because he could have booked this match and he should have. It's too late now. Dude, if they announced it tomorrow, I wouldn't want to see it. I'd watch it, but maybe. But I wouldn't expect anything. I just wouldn't expect a thing. To me, dude, it's way too late for that.
Yeah, they missed their opportunity. The window is closed now, and I just don't think that it would be the same, because these guys are older now, and they wouldn't have as good a match, in my opinion.
And I think they both know that. I think they would both be brutally honest with where they are physically. Let's face it, folks, just let them be happy in their retirement. Let them heal. I mean, there's enough pro wrestlers out there who are hobbling around, they'll never not hurt. I mean, I don't know what it's like to never not hurt, okay? I don't want to know. But there's plenty of wrestlers out there today who will always walk with a limp, who will always be on some sort of medication because the pain is tough. So if they're both healthy and they're happy with their families, I say go with that, because at the end of the day, what matters to me more than anything now as an adult is not seeing these guys perform, it's seeing these guys be healthy. So we're taking it home now, man. And you know what we always do here, Greg. And this is a big topic. Still a lot more we could have talked about. Maybe one day we'll revisit it, as we've said before, on different topics. But as far as Sting goes for this episode, give me your final word on Sting.
Okay, I'm going to do something a little different here. I'm going to read some stuff that other guys in the business have said about Sting. I think it's fitting. John Cena mimicked Sting's hairstyle in his younger years and recalled, "He was my guy." Seth Rollins would dress up as Sting in his youth. Tommy Dreamer told how he wanted to be Sting, a sentiment shared by Jeff Hardy. Cody Rhodes and Shelton Benjamin named him their favorite childhood wrestler, while Tyson Kidd professed to being a huge Sting fan as a kid. He was also a prominent influence on industry veterans such as Kurt Angle, Bill Goldberg, Kane, AJ Styles, and Goldust. Bray Wyatt has stressed that he really would like to take on Sting, adding, "I have to have that before I die. I don't care if it happens outside a Waffle House, anywhere."
Dude, I don't know if you could have said it any better. That's good stuff. I think a true measure of a pro wrestler in this business is the mark he leaves. And what's the old sentiment that every good pro wrestler has? I want to leave the business better than it was than when I got here. And I think we can say that Sting left it better than it was when he got here. He's a personal favorite. I'll always have a lot of respect for this guy. I respect what he brought to the game. I respect how he reinvented himself over the years and the phenomenon that he became in his career. More importantly, I respect Steve Borden as a man, and I think that he did what was best for himself and his family over the years. At the end of the day, Sting did it his way, and I can't argue with that. We should all be so fortunate as to do things on our own terms. A quick little addendum on this particular episode. This was recorded before Sting joined All Elite Wrestling. We actually had no idea that was coming. As pro wrestling fans, we'd speculated on it for a very long time. Greg and myself weren't the only two that had done that. Phil and I had as well, and many, many others, I'm sure, had talked about it. What's the possibility that Sting will join Tony Khan's company? Think of the dream matches he could have. Sting versus Cody Rhodes, Sting versus Darby Allin. Some of the biggest names in that company. And what if they faced off against the legend, the icon that is Sting? We didn't think it was actually going to happen, but as pro wrestling fans, we all know one true mantra. If nothing else, we hold near and dear. It's the fact that you never say never, because anything can happen in the business. That's just how it goes. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes that can be bad, if I'm being honest. But this was quite a surprise. It was a shock. As of the recording of this addendum, it's been a very good thing for AEW. The ratings have gone through the roof. There's a lot of spotlight on that company, more so than ever before. And they seem to be on some upward momentum, which is good. They're on the right track, it appears to be, which is not only good for All Elite Wrestling and everybody there, but it's also good for Sting, obviously. And let's be honest, it's good for the pro wrestling industry as a whole. And as pro wrestling fans, we all want to see the business grow and prosper. That's the goal. We want it to be here for many, many years to come. With any luck, Sting will be a part of the growth of AEW in the future. He has signed a multi-million dollar contract, I'm sure, and a multi-year contract. And he's there. So we will have to see how it all plays out. But regardless of what happens in AEW, nothing can touch his legacy. Of course, he is a legend. He is the icon. He is the Hall of Famer. He is all of the above and much, much more. And that is Sting. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.